This is my ice dyeing tutorial, and to get started, first I just wanted to talk a little bit about safety. You should not have your skin in contact with your dyes. Please don't get it in your eyes, and you shouldn't inhale it, so you should wear a dust mask. Secondly, the other product that we're going to be using is soda ash or sodium carbonate. Again, please don't get that in contact with your skin or your eyes, and certainly don't ingest it. And so if you haven't seen the effect of ice dyeing, here's what we will be trying to reproduce today. And I'm going to be using 3 procion dyes, and procion dyes are fiber reactive dyes, so they react with cellulose, things like cotton and linen, and they are permanent dyes. But to use them, you must use soda ash, which creates an alkaline environment. If you don't use soda ash, you will get some colour to start with, but it cannot be as strong, and it can also wash out over your consecutive washes. The thing we'll be using, because it's ice dyeing, is ice. If you happen to live in a country where you've got snow, you can substitute snow for ice. The ice dyeing itself, I usually let that go for about 12 hours, so often overnight. I'm doing it during the day so I can film it for you. First steps are to soak whatever it is you're going to be dyeing in a soda ash solution for about half an hour, and then you can just spin that soda ash out or squeeze it out if you're wearing gloves. You can reuse your soda ash solution. We will then, with the combination of dyes that we'll put together over the top of our ice that we will put in a layer over we're going to be dyeing a sheet. We will let the ice melt and leave that, as I said, for about 12 hours. And then we do something called batching the dye, and that's again leaving it between 1 and 3 days in a warm, moist environment, so somewhere in the sun is just perfect. I estimate that, and if it's winter in Melbourne, then I tend to leave it for 3 days. If it's summer, I'll leave it for 1 day, and then if it's spring and autumn, just somewhere in between. And then there's going to be an awful lot of rinsing. So unfortunately, you do use a lot of water when you are ice dyeing. I do 3 long rinses in cold water until I don't get any more dye out, including lots of soaking. And I will rinse this over a day or so, or half a day in cold water, and then I will do 3 hot water rinses again until I don't get any of the dyes rinsing out. And after that, I just wash the product as normal, and we would then be ready to go. So as I said, I'm going to be ice dyeing a white bed sheet bought from an op shop. It's half a king size sheet. This will ultimately be turned into a beautiful dress. The first thing I'm going to do before I soak my sheet is I'm going to just unpull that folded over area. You know, at the top of the sheet it's folded over twice. 2 reasons for that. One is there's an awful lot of fabric. There's probably another like 10 centimeters of fabric there. And the second is that the stitching, the white stitching or any stitching on your sheets is polyester. Polyester as a synthetic will not take up any dye, and so you'll have this beautiful coloured sheet and white stitching. At the end of the sheet, it's less important, and I'll tell you why later, but I want to use all of this fabric. So I am just going to rip, 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 rip. The most satisfying part so far. Let's briefly talk about the setup that I use for ice dyeing. So I always have something that as the ice melts, the water, the fluid can go through, and then I have something to capture that in. If it's a good day, then I will put that outside, but it's not, so we'll be doing it inside. What I'm going to do is also put some cotton in the bottom of this, which will soak up the dye that's come out, and then I can use that for anything else as well. If you've got a container that doesn't have all these holes in it, that's perfect. So to make up my soda ash solution, it needs to be at about 6%. So I'm going to make up 4 litres and I use warm water. So 4 litres of warm water to 240 grams of soda ash, which I've already measured out. If you are in America, you could use 1 gallon, which is just under 3.8 litres, to 1 cup, which is 227 grams of soda ash. Just as another safety note, anything that your soda ash or your dyes touch, don't use in your kitchen. Always use separate utensils. So I'm just using an old yogurt container and I am using a bucket that I can just rinse out. So you need to dissolve the soda ash in warm water. Always add the soda ash to the water and not the other way around. So as we're dyeing a sheet, I'm now going to put the sheet into the soda ash solution. If you haven't got enough liquid, like sometimes it's a bit hard to judge, you can just make some more up separately and pour that in. So I'm using a utensil that I don't use in the kitchen, and I will just leave this now for 30 minutes. Every now and then I'll come and poke it down so that it's totally covered, and that's the important thing. You want your sheet or whatever it is you're dyeing to be as fully covered as it can be. I'm just going to wring out the sheet, and just as a reminder, you should wear gloves and you should also wear safety glasses because you don't want to get any of the soda ash splashed into your eyes. Now the soda ash can be reused. I store it in some large plastic or large glass containers for months and months. And even if it dries out and crystallizes again, you can still just add some water and reuse it. Let's go over my setup again. Look, I've just got this on a trolley so I can put it in some good light to film, so that's not required. But on the bottom I've got, I guess like it's a lid that's got some depth which will catch the drips as they come through. Above that I've got a tray that the drips will come through, but I've put an old sheet that I've soaked in soda ash on top of that because I'm basically going to sort of double dye, if you like. So this is my setup for my sheet. So you can see the sheet is scrunched up in a wire basket. The ice will sit on top and the dye will sit on top of that. As the water melts, the dye will go into the fabric and move around, and the water or the ice as it melts will go through this, and then I will be able to dye that sheet there before it ultimately goes through that as well into the catchment area. So I've put 5 kilograms of ice for that sheet, which is half a king-size bed sheet. So I'm ready to put my dyes on, and I've put on a shirt. Because I'm wearing cotton, any one little particle of the dyes will dye my clothing as well. So I'm going to pretend I've got gloves on. You'll see what happens. My hands are going to get stained. It will wash out in a couple of days. Oh my! That is thunder. Okay, I like to start off with the lightest one. Now with these dyes, they're all a little bit different. This one does tend to clump, which is why I like to start off with it. Now the question of how much, well, a bit of experience, depends on the weight of the fabric that you're dyeing. And what I'm trying to do though is use an equivalent amount of each of the dyes. So you can see already, hopefully you can, that is already starting to melt. I love that effect. You can dye again if things, don't go as planned, but if you're going to do that, you still need to go back and start again and use the soda ash. I'm not worried about getting any dye onto the fabric directly. You do get these little dots, but I like that effect, so it doesn't worry me at all. Sometimes I just put some dye in an area by itself, like one dye. Sometimes I mix them all up, which is why each garment I make, everything I ice dye, is absolutely unique. So let's just do a little close-up so you can see what that looks like. That's the lichen, the first one I put on, and sometimes it doesn't all dissolve. It does tend to happen a little bit with that. You can see all of the ice cubes. Now we are just going to leave that. You can just see little bits in there already where there's ice that's not covering it. I'll come back and have a look later. So here are my hands with the dye. Remember I said I wasn't wearing any gloves. And here's the shirt that I'd put on as an overshirt that I didn't care about. And yeah, that's dyed. That's not going to come out now. So this is 5 hours and you can see that the ice is still melting, but like look at these beautiful little areas that we are getting. Like just absolutely lovely. This is the lichen, and I think I mentioned that sometimes some of it doesn't melt so well. You can see here we've got these little spots sitting there. That's okay, we will rinse those all out when we're finished. So I'm going to leave this overnight and then I will batch it, and I'll show you how to do that tomorrow. It's the next morning and all of the ice has melted. Apart from, also the ice is melted, but you can see there's these little bits of dye that haven't moved. That happens with that particular dye colour quite a bit. It's okay, it will just rinse off. So now I have got just a plastic bag. I'm going to put it in the plastic bag, tie a knot in it, and I'm going to leave it for a day, then I'll check it. 1 or 2 days, and it's called batching, and this is again another important step. You can't miss it. That's the thing with ice dyeing. While there's not a lot of work to do it, safety issues, and there's a lot of time involved. You recall at the start I said that the polyester thread that's used doesn't dye, so that's it here. You can see it standing out quite a bit, and when I rinse that, any colour that's still in that thread will just wash out because it's a synthetic. And this is the sheet that I put in the bottom of the container because I said I just wanted to dye something else. Got a couple of little white spots there. It's okay, we'll work around that. So that will also get batched. And I'm just picking this up. You can see my sort of tray is full. Now the dye loses its chemical reactivity over time. If you try to use that, and you can dye things, but they come out quite a different colour. So the underlying colour of that is green. So I'll probably get something that's some sort of shades of green, which can be great for lace and doilies. I should say I've just bought this upstairs and I've popped it in a bucket in my laundry. It'll get some sun a little bit later, and it will stay moist. That's the important thing, so it needs to be warm and moist. If it dries out, like you forget to batch it, or it's a really hot day and by the time you get to it it's dry, it's okay. You can just spray it with water and then wrap it back up. You can use cling film, also known as Glad wrap. You can, with these the plastic bags that I use, you can just hose them out at the end and dry them off and reuse them. I have decided I will just dye, so it won't be ice dyeing, it will be dyeing some scraps of cotton, and I've got table runner that was stained and some bits of doily. So these have been soaking in soda ash for 20 minutes. I'm going to wring them out and I'm going to put them in what's left, sort of our dye bath. You can see it's got a bit of a green tinge. I'll leave them in all day and then I'll show you what they look like. Again, wear gloves, don't do what I do, do what I say. Just put that there. And we pull these out. So there's a mix, there's some of the bone colour, some things are white. They'll all take up the dye differently. They're all cotton, but some of the cottons are quite thick. like this is quite thick. So generally, and this is stained, badly stained, so that'll be interesting. Generally, the more fibre you have, the more colour you get. And that's because these are fibre reactive dyes. They react with the fibre, so they are chemically bonding to the fibres. They're not a stain like tea or coffee is a stain. It sits on the surface, it doesn't bond with the fibres. These do. So what's this? Oh, this is a bit of the same sheet actually. Rightio, we'll pick you up and I'll stir everything in. This is that stained one you can see, and doily, and looks like bits of other doilies, and of course more doilies. So let's just get everything in there. What I think will happen is that they'll look okay to start with when I take them out, and I'll batch them. What I tend to find happens with this sort of leftover dye is it actually acts also as more of a stain rather than a dye, and when I rinse them you lose a lot of the colour. Like I've sometimes dyed something that I thought was going to turn out blue, you know, like something like this that was all blue, and in the end they end up grey. Anyway, I will need to come out a few times during the day, and because they're not all under the dye, I might move that up there, move them around a bit. Let's put it all in where there's more. Anyway, so it's always fun and games doing some experiments. Rightio, I have been rinsing out my dyed fabric for 24 hours. I just want to show you, there is still a little bit of colour coming out in the water, not a lot, just a bit. So it's had 4 cold water rinses and 4 hot water rinses, and that's always sort of about my minimum. But I've been doing that over 24 hours, so I put it in the water and I come back and I swish it around, maybe it's there for a couple of hours. I look at how much dye is coming out, and when it gets really dark, I change the water over, swish it out, blah, blah, blah. So essentially it's had 8 washes in 24 hours. That's pretty normal. This would just need 1 more, will be my view. Not a lot in there at all. And then you can put it in the washing machine with some dye catcher if that's what you want to do. I don't tend to. And then we'll dry it and we'll be ready to show you and to use. Let's have a look at the final dried sheet, or half a sheet, which was cotton sateen. I think it's really lovely. Now the thing with ice dyeing, that's the back and that's the front. Well, that's the front and that's the back. It doesn't matter. It's chemically bonded to the fibres, the cotton fibres, and so the back is also coloured and dyed. So for me, it's like an impressionist or a watercolour effect. If I just go close, you can see that, and you can still see little spots of dye here and there, which I really like. So the trick is the colour combinations, and if you don't get it right, you will just end up with a very mucky brown. So let's also have a look at, this was a synthetic thread, and I keep calling it cotton. You remember I removed most of it from the main sheet, and I didn't remove this so you could see what happens. It takes up a little bit in like a stain, so the challenge for you is if you'd left this on and you were trying to use the whole piece, you would have like a thread, white thread all the way through it, which, if you like that, that's fine, but it's not what I wanted. I'll use a different colour. So I'm also showing you this cotton sheet, which is just a flat cotton, not sateen, that I put on the bottom of the bucket of the container. And you might remember we let the ice, which as it melted, it's water, drip through the top sheet onto this. So what you get are sort of bigger patterns. See, with the ice you get much sharper movement. Because these are drips of water, you get sort of much bigger. And the colour is slightly different too. Let's just open it up. It's a paler version of this, and you'd expect that because most of the dye is going to be here, held on as it's reacting to the sheet. So you will always get a more muted version. So if you're using things together, it can be really, really effective because you know that those colours are going to go together. They're sort of just different tones and a slightly different pattern on the same thing. Also look at what I call dyed in the muck. So the bits of cotton and doilies that I put in the muck. And you might remember the muck had a slight green tinge, but I did say things often come out as unexpected colours. So this is a bit sagey green, and as is this. This one though, which is quite thick cotton, has therefore got a lot of the stain or a lot of the dye on it, is quite blue. So you can see the difference between, they're totally different. And this one also looks a little green. And then this is just a plain bit of sheet. This is actually the same sheet as this. So this is dyed in the dyes with the ice. This was dyed in the muck that was left underneath. So essentially I've been able to dye 3 batches of textiles just using my 5 kilos of ice and my dyes. I wanted to make a comment about frayed edges. So that happens in the washing machine at the end. So to avoid that, you could serge or zigzag across the edges. I don't worry about it. I collect these and they're coloured, and I'll use them in some of my other work.